Okay, so this is the first video in the exclusive content for Patreons. I'm going to be talking about the cocktail syrup Oleosaccharum. So what is Oleosaccharum? Well, it's actually a bit complicated. The words mean oil sugar. It's actually bad Latin, but that's kind of beyond this video. The traditional ingredients to it, granulated sugar and citrus peels without the pith, generally in a 1-to-1 ratio by mass, although some people do it by volume. But if you use volume, you'll probably end up with too much sugar because the sugar packs more densely than the fruit peels. The prevailing idea going around is that Oleosaccharum is made because of the hygroscopic nature of sugar, and that draws the oils out of the peel using osmosis. And if you actually go over to the Wikipedia article on it and look it up, you'll see at the end of the article that it infers that this is mostly a myth, which is true. And I actually wrote those last two sentences because what they were saying before was completely wrong. So generally speaking, osmosis is the process by which a semi-permeable membrane will allow a solvent to flow through the membrane in order to balance the concentration of the solutions on either side of the membrane. So here's a simple example that is used often to explain it. Just say these are two L-shaped containers connected by a semi-permeable membrane. You have one side that is a low concentration, one side that's a high concentration. And by that, I mean, say this is water. You'll have, say, 200 grams of sugar in this side, and you'll have 100 grams of sugar on this side. So the flow will be from the less concentrated side to the more concentrated side until the concentration has balanced, or some other force stops it. So like if this was covered and the water was compressing the air and the pressure was stopping it, or if this was really tall and gravity overcame it. Generally speaking, membrane allows the solvent to pass through it like water, but not the compound that's dissolved in it like salt or sugar. In order for osmosis to happen, the solvent that is the driving process, so in this case they're saying oil is the solvent, it needs to be able to dissolve the thing that is causing the concentration imbalance. So they're saying sugar is causing the concentration imbalance, but sugar, granulated sugar or sucrose, is a polar compound. Oil is a non-polar compound. Oil cannot dissolve sucrose. Water, another polar compound, can dissolve sucrose, but not oil. Water and oil don't mix because their polarities are different. And just like they don't mix, oil and sucrose don't mix. That can't be driving osmosis. And I'll explain what actually happens. But first I'm going to show some photos of what I did when making some Oleosaccharum for this video. Since I can get much closer in using a photo and crop it in to get even closer than that. So I made some Oleosaccharum a few days ago. It was just 85 grams of lemon peel, 85 grams of sugar. You can see this Ziploc bag photo of the oil sugar mix. You can see that some of the sugar didn't dissolve, but most of it dissolved. Since most of it dissolved, we can say that the major fluid in there is a polar compound. And since we know it came from fruit, and fruit is mostly water, water also being a polar compound that will dissolve a polar sugar, we can say with some authority that the major liquid in there is water and not oil. And the water comes from the peels themselves, right? There are some citrus oils in there though. I can both smell them and taste them when I open the container and test it. You can see them forming a layer in this photo of a mason jar that I've illuminated. The main oil in citrus peels is called limonene. It makes up over 90% of the oils present. So what I wanted to do was a sort of simple way to test how much oil was probably in there. So I took this 50 milliliter centrifuge tube. I added 35 milliliters of the Oleosaccharum and then 15 milliliters of distilled water. That adds up to 50 milliliters. I added the water to get better separation from the oils since they can't mix. I then stuck it in the fridge overnight for even more separation because dropping the temperature also drops solubility. You can see from this photo a definite layer formed on top. That layer is about 2.5 milliliters worth of oil. So from the original 35 milliliters of Oleosaccharum, there's 2.5 milliliters of citrus oil, or a little over 7%. I can't say if this is a good or a bad number because I've never measured it before, but what I can say is that Oleosaccharum, or oil sugar, is actually water sugar with some oil dripped in because it's obviously mostly water. Let's talk a bit about actually making it though, what actually happens when you make it, and some tips on how to maximize the effect so you get a more flavorful syrup. So when prepping to make this oleosaccharum, the first thing you need to do is minimize the amount of pith you take while peeling. Some people will actually leave the peels and sugar in the container that they're going to use, and then just add more sugar and peel when needed, and then scoop out the syrup as needed. But a problem with this method is that if there is too much pith left attached to the zest, or what is called the exocarp, you may end up with a syrup that gets progressively more bitter, because both tannins and a compound called limonene, both very bitter compounds, are extracted from the pith. It's okay if there's a bit of pith on there though. I mean, you can always slice a bit off with a paring knife. You can see from this photo, both the mesocarp, which is called the albedo or the pith, and the exocarp called the flavido or the zest, you really only want that thinner layer, the exocarp. You can also actually zest it if you want to using a zester. I've never done it that way, but the more I think about it, it should give you a superior product. However, you will need to filter the syrup with a fine mesh strainer when you want to remove the solids. When adding the ingredients, you need to add the peels before you add the sugar, and you need to muddle the peels before you add the sugar. This is because the actual phenomenon behind the extracting of the citrus oils is simply just damaging the oil glands on the outer surface of the lemon. You can see in these two images an intact oil gland and then a burst oil gland. The hole isn't very big at all. The oils will literally just leak out of the gland. Then diffusion and capillary action takes over and pulls the oils deeper into the sugar until the sugars dissolve, because at the same time as that oil is being pulled in, water is being extracted out from the peels, and that water is going to start dissolving the sugar. And once the sugar is dissolved, that capillary action won't work anymore. So the oil glands are very small, but they're very easy to damage with the right tools, like a muddler. If you've ever seen someone spritz a lemon or orange peel, it's these oil glands bursting open as they're compressed and releasing their oils. You need a muddler to do it. You don't actually need a muddler, but it's best to use a muddler. You may be able to use a meat tenderizer because it has the same sort of texture, but it'd probably be hard to manipulate in the container you're using. Muddler works best. You might be able to use a spoon to just squish it and stab it. For mine, I just smacked it a lot with the edge of a fermentation tamper because I don't own a muddler. The last thing you can do to maximize extraction is put it in a vacuum sealed bag so that the sugar is held tight against the surface of the peel. If you don't have a vacuum sealer bag, or a vacuum sealer, I should say, don't worry, I have a trick you can use. I mean, I have a vacuum sealer, but I use this trick for a lot of things because I'm lazy and I don't want to get it out. So what you do is you put all your stuff in the bag, put your lemon peels in here. You can muddle them beforehand in a bowl and then put them in here. Then put in your sugar, close it up, shake it up a bit to get all the pieces coated. Then what you can do is open it up a little bit, push out as much of the air as you can, then seal the bag as much as until there's about an inch, which is about 25 millimeters. I'll show you. About this much left, and then you squish the two pieces or ends together like that. So the rest of the zip is sealed, but this isn't. Then you just suck the air out with your mouth. And you may need to, make little channels by sliding the bag around so that the air can get sucked out. But you can suck the air out, and then right when it's about done, you can just seal it up like that quickly. And it works amazingly well. I do it actually for a lot of things that I want to last longer, and they actually do last longer. And I prefer the freezer bags because they are thicker plastic. So you put in your lemon peels and your sugar, vacuum seal it if you can. You can also just use a mason jar or whatever, but I find that the Ziploc bag thing works best. Leave it on your countertop or in a cupboard or something for between 4 and 24 hours. It works way better if you leave it out on the counter. Don't put it in the fridge because the fridge cools the oils and they don't leak out as easily. Some of them may even become more sludgy than liquid, but that's essentially all you do. And then when you're done, you can pour it through a strainer. Until next time, have a great day, and thanks for supporting the channel through Patreon.